Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more in the Buddha's words. We will beginning today by starting chapter 6, which means we'll be getting into another introduction. So this will probably be a longer episode because these usually are several pages. But with that said, let's go ahead and hop into this. In interpreting suttas, we have to take into account of the circumstances under which they were spoken and the persons to whom they were addressed. During the course of his long ministry, the Buddha had to adjust his teaching to people with different capacities and needs. He taught those given to reckless behavior to abandon their self-defeating ways and engage in wholesome actions that yield pleasant fruits. He taught those inclined to resign themselves to fate that present effort determines our present quality of life as well as our future destiny. He taught those convinced that personal existence ceases with bodily death that living beings survive the breakup of the body and re-arise in accordance with their karma. He taught those not yet ripe enough for higher attainments to aspire for rebirth among the devas, the celestial beings, and to enjoy the bliss and glory of the heavens. A blissful heavenly rebirth, however, is not the final purpose for which the Buddha taught the Dhamma. At best, it is only a temporary way station. The ultimate goal is the cessation of suffering, and the bliss of the heavens, no matter how blissful, is not the same as the cessation of suffering. According to the Buddha's teachings, all states of existence within the round of rebirths, even the heavens, are transient, unreliable, bound up with pain. Thus, the ultimate aim of the Dhamma is nothing short of liberation, which means total release from the round of birth and death. What lies beyond the round of rebirths is an unconditioned state called Nibbana. Nibbana transcends the conditioned world, yet it can be attained within conditioned existence in this very life and experienced as the extinction of suffering. The Buddha realized Nibbana through his enlightenment, and for the next 45 years of his life, he endeavored to help others realize it for themselves. The realization of Nibbana comes with the blossoming of wisdom and brings perfect peace, untarnished happiness, and the stilling of the mind's compulsive drives. Nibbana is the destruction of thirst, the thirst of craving. It is also the island of safety and amid the raging currents of old age, sickness, and death. To guide his spiritually mature disciples toward Nibbana, the Buddha had to steer them beyond the blissful toward rewards that could be won in a future life by performing wholesome deeds. He did so through the world transcending facets of his teaching, those aspects designed to lead disciples beyond the triple world of sense sphere existence, form sphere existence, and formless existence. Again and again throughout the discourses, Buddha ordered an uncompromising, razor-sharp exposure to the dangers inherent in all conditioned states of being. He sounded a clear warning signal that all states of existence are perilous and fraught with pain. He insisted unambiguously that the one hope of lasting security lies in complete purification and liberation of the mind. He presented a path that cuts through ignorance and craving in the entirety and dispels attachment even to the most refined states of meditative absorption. In his graduated discourse on the Dhamma, given to introduce newcomers to his teaching, the Buddha regularly began by discussing such practices as giving and moral discipline. He would extol the beauty of such virtues as generosity, harmlessness, honesty, and self-restraint, explaining how such meritorious deeds lead to the joys of a heavenly rebirth. At this point, he would reveal the danger, degradation, and defilement of sensual pleasures with the blessings of renunciation. Having thus gradually ripened the minds of his audience, he would next expound the doctrine distinctive of his own teaching, the Four Noble Truths: suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path. When the Buddha himself taught the Four Noble Truths, his purpose was not to give his listeners an introductory course in basic Buddhism, but to awaken them to the vision of the Dhamma, the first direct realization of the transcendent truth that sets the disciple on the irreversible path to liberation. Though we sometimes read the suttas that disciples attain their first experience of awakening merely by listening to the Buddha preach, this does not mean the Dhamma is easy to understand. Such disciples could penetrate the truth with such apparent ease because their faculties were mature. Perhaps, too, because they had accumulated sufficient supporting conditions from previous lives. But, by its very nature, the world-transcending Dhamma goes against the grain of the mundane mind. The Buddha describes the Dhamma as subtle, deep, and difficult to see. And one of the things that makes it so difficult to see is its thesis that the highest happiness cannot be won by yielding to the longings of the heart, but only by subduing them. This thesis runs utterly counter to the thought, attitudes, and actions of people fully immersed in the world. As long as we are infatuated with the seductive lures of sensual enjoyment, as long as we take delight in being this or becoming that, we will regard the sublime Dhamma as a mystery and a puzzle. The Buddha therefore realized that the first major challenge he would face in establishing this world transcending Dhamma was to break the grip that the sensual pleasure and worldly attachment have upon the mind. He had to knock the mind out of its accustomed ruts and set it moving on an altogether different direction. He had to steer his disciples away from the lures of sensuality and worldly attachment and guide them toward the disenchantment, complete dispassion, and awakening. The requirements of this task drew upon all the Buddha's skills as a teacher. It demanded that he make ample use of his ability to precisely adjust his teaching to the mental proclivities of the people who came to him for instruction. It demanded that he speak up frankly and candidly, even when candor bred resentment. It demanded that he enter the fray of debate, even though he much preferred the peace of seclusion. It demanded that he use similes, metaphors, and parables whenever concrete illustrations could give his argument stronger appeal. It demanded that he uphold his principles strongly, whether his adversaries were hostile ascetics or miscreant monks within the ranks of his own order. That the Buddha succeeded so well in fulfilling this this difficult task is counted among his truly wonderful and marvelous accomplishments. This is a point to which text 6.1 bears eloquent testimony. The Buddha's task at this stage is unfolding of his doctrine is to impart to us a radically new education to the art of seeing. To follow the Buddha in this direction he wants to lead us, we have to learn to see beneath the surface glitter of pleasure, position, and power that usually enthralls us, and at the same time to learn to see through the deceptive distortions of perception, thought, and views that habitually cloak our vision. Ordinarily, we repent things to ourselves through the refractory prism of subjective biases. These biases are shaped by our craving and attachments, which they in turn reinforce. We see things that we want to see. We blot out things that threaten or disturb us, that shake our complacency, that throw into question our comforting assumptions about ourselves and our lives. To undo this process involves a commitment to truth that is often unsettling, but in the long run proves exhilarating and liberating. The education that the Buddha imparts to us brings about a deepening of our perspective on the world. To help us transform our understanding and deepen our perspective on the world, he offers us 3 standpoints from which we can appraise the values by which we order our lives. These 3 standpoints also represent 3 moments or steps in an unfolding process of insight that starts from our common sense attitudes and moves strategically toward higher knowledge, enlightenment, and release. The 3 moments are gratification, asada, danger, adinava, and escape, nisarana. In text chapter 6, section 2, part 1 through part 3, this scheme is applied to the world as a whole. Elsewhere in the Nikayas, the scheme is applied more specifically to the 4 material elements, the 5 aggregates, and the 6 internal and external sense bases. And the Buddha underscores the importance of this scheme with the bold pronouncement that until he was able to fully evaluate the world, or in the text referred to just above, the elements, aggregates, and sense bases in this way, he did not claim that he had attained the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment. In advancing Systematically through the scheme, one begins by recognizing the undubitable fact that the worldly phenomena as sense objects, forms, and feelings give us some degree of gratification. This gratification consists in the pleasure and joy, sukha samanasa, we experience when we succeed in fulfilling our desires. Once we acknowledge this fact, we can then probe deeper by asking whether such pleasure and joy are entirely satisfactory. If we address this question with utter honesty in a dispassionate frame of mind, we will realize that such pleasure and joy are far from satisfactory. To the contrary, they are saddled with drawbacks and defects ranging from the trifling to the catastrophic, defects that we perpetually hide from ourselves so we can continue unhindered in our quest for gratification. This is their danger, the second moment or step of observation. The most pervasive danger lurking behind the innocent facade of our worldly pleasure is their inherent nature of being impermanent, anika, bound up with suffering and discontent, dukkha, and subject to inevitable change and decay, viparinamadhamma. But we'll go ahead and end that particular episode there. So yeah, that's the first half of the introduction of chapter 6. But yeah, we're getting into, thus far, it's been the basics, more or less, I guess we could say. And now the Buddha is trying to deepen how we understand certain things. At least that's how I see it, how I understood what I just read. So, but yeah, we'll go ahead and end this episode here. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.